This impacts your life, it impacts your career, it impacts your finances, and it really hits you in your relationships. So this video, I am gonna go a little deep with you. This is the kind of work that I've been doing with my clients for the past 15 years that I've been working with people in the space of dating and relationships, but really this impacts your life, it impacts your career, it impacts your finances, and it really hits you in your relationships. And that is the relationship that you had and maybe even still have with your father. And the reason why I'm sharing this is I feel like I'll just be super honest with you. I always felt like in the past that no one wanted to hear about this sort of stuff, that people just wanted to hear about the semantics and the fast things, like just tell me what I can do to get in a relationship or get what I want, and everyone was just so conditioned to this very McDonald's fast food Instagram lifestyle. But I believe that we as a planet are going through an awakening. I think that matters of the heart, mental health, these things, we're finally waking up to the fact that we can't escape it, that until we are honest about these things and really look at them and quit running from them, that they're never gonna go away. And the more that we run from topics like the one I'm about to go into, the longer they continue to sabotage our life, the longer they continue to steal and rob us of our dreams, our hopes, our desires, our vision for what we want, for a more fulfilled version of us, a bigger legacy of us. So I just feel like we're ready. And so I wish I had been talking about this stuff sooner, but better late than never. But this is the kind of work that I've been behind the scenes supporting my clients with. And now I just feel brave enough and bold enough to openly start talking about the work that I've been doing in private with my clients. So your relationship with your father affects your relationships, and it affects every area of your life. And I'm going to share with you how I even stumbled upon this. It's actually quite shocking. Some of you may not even know this about me when I tell you about this, but you know, anytime I take on a new client and I start working with them, my first question is, tell me about your parents. What did they teach you about love? And everyone comes from a different home. You know, one client that I was most shocked by actually came from a really good home, but because it was such a happy home, they never taught him conflict resolution. So when he would get into relationships with really strong women, he would just lose his voice. And his dad never taught him how to use his voice. But some of us, most of us, come from pretty effed up homes. Maybe you've had a narcissistic father who took your voice away, who beat you down, who made you feel belittled and feel like shit. Maybe you grew up in a very chaotic home, raised by a single mother, and your father wasn't there, and so you felt chaos. You had to grow up much sooner and never really in those formative years got to develop. And maybe you're still operating out of survival. Maybe you still operate through a very frantic, scared energy. That's still energy that's still locked from that 6-year-old, that 7-year-old, that 5-year-old, that's still there. And so you're still doing life out of that energy. We're going to talk about it because the reality is your past can determine your future if the past continues to be the driver of your life. The only way to stop that is for you to get into the driver's seat of your own life by not running from what happened to you, but actively looking at it and getting the tools and the resources to work through it and to gain some clarity and to gain some real freedom so that your life can have the momentum that it's supposed to have, that part of you that goes, I just feel like life should be easier. I feel like my life should be better. I feel like my relationships should be so much more smoother. And it's like, yes, that is true. But sometimes it's handling the things of the past. This is how I actually stumbled into this. My parents were ministers, and I always had this gift of wisdom. And for whatever reason, it showed up a lot in relationships. And people would call my parents home. I was a teenager, and they would want to talk to my parents about problems they were having. And I would say, my parents aren't here. They didn't have cell phones back then, but I'm here if you want me to talk to you and listen to you. And I don't even know what I would say, but they would call my parents later and say, your daughter has a gift of wisdom. She shared something with me, and it was far above her years of what she would know about a situation like this, and you should know that your daughter has this gift. So fast forward, I was a youth minister for my parents' church, and we had a small youth group, and they were inner city kids, or kids who came from low-income families. And I'll never forget, it was a night service that we were having, and I intuitively got this experience that I took my youth group through. And I dimmed the lights in the room, and I was playing some really soft music and really creating an environment for them to access their hearts. And if my memory serves me correctly, I had them write out all over a sheet of paper everything that their father was. My father's angry, my father's turbulent, my father's absent, my father puts me down, my father doesn't provide for me, my father withholds my needs from me, my father doesn't believe in me, he never speaks to me, whatever it is. And I really created a safe container for them to write down everything that they had experienced their father to be. And so as I'm doing this, obviously I'm praying inside, because I wanted to create a safe environment for these unprocessed emotions to be able to come out on paper. Now, mind you, this is a youth group. These kids were not showing up for this, but it was what I felt inspired to do and led to do. And so they were writing all of these things down. And as I'm looking in the room, and there's obviously this safety and there's this soft presence that's in the room to help facilitate this safe space, I begin to see tears come down, and I start hearing. It makes me emotional because I can still see it. They were sitting on the floor, and there were folded chairs, and I could see them sitting on the floor and writing on this piece of paper on the folded chairs as their desk, and I could just hear the cries coming out and the tears, and so I just gave them that moment to write all those things down, and I would even encourage you to consider something like this. And so as they did it, I allowed them to kind of come back to themselves, and I said, now we're going to change gears here. We're going to change the pace. And I want you to know that everything that you see on that piece of paper, that your father, how you feel about him, how you feel he shows up, how you see him, how he impacts you, that now I want you to know that God says that he is none of those things. And I learned, I knew intuitively, and I learned later that the way we even experience God is how we see our parents. Because God is love, our parents are our first interaction of love, and so the story gets formulated from there, and we begin to live our lives out of this story. And so the kids began to just go marking out through each one. God is not angry. He's not angry with me. He has not abandoned me. He doesn't not love me. He doesn't talk down to me. And you could just feel the room, from this room full of hurt to like there was this heavy weight that each of these youth members in my group had been carrying. And you could feel the weight as they began to mark off each one, begin to lift and lift and lift and lift and lift. And then as we were finishing up, I began to speak hope into them about who God is and what love is for them, and to help create and birth a new story of what love is. And so I share that story with you because most of the time we don't realize it, but we are typically living out the experiences that we had with our parents, with our father, when it comes to love. You know, I've seen men who have come from narcissistic fathers and then be terrified to use their voice with women, to stand up for themselves, to communicate their desires. Lots of nice guys, scared to just say, hey, I want to be intimate with you, you know, I want a relationship with you. I just don't want to be your friend. Like, terrified to use their voice this way because of a narcissistic father who just beat them down, or men who came from very controlling homes who don't know how to move the relationship forward with a woman because no one's ever given them the permission to be in the driver's seat. No one has ever given them the permission to lead in relationships because they lost that permission as a child. And so it was never ever even given to them. So they don't know how to do it in relationships. And a lot of times I will see people who come to me who are clients who maybe are like really successful in their career. They make really good money in their career. But for whatever reason, that success doesn't translate in their relationships. And they're like, I can show up like a boss. I can show up. I'm in charge at work. But something about when it comes to relationships, I'll never forget. I met a guy in Bali. He was a multi-millionaire. And he just said the same thing. He was like, I don't know what it is. Like, when it comes to women, when it comes to relationships, he's like, I'm such an alpha. But when it comes to relationships, something just changes, and I can't take what I do in work and I can't bring that into relation. I can't be that same person. And so this is a way I've always explained it. I've not heard anyone else explain it this way, but this is what I know, and I can only share from what I know. What I know is that the heart is one of the most tender things each of us has. And to convey that point, to maybe illustrate it a little bit better, well, let me finish that and I'll tell you the illustration. So when it comes to relationships, it bypasses everything and it typically goes straight to our heart if we're not obsessively guarding our hearts. Most of the time, relationships, they hit our hearts, which is the most tender, vulnerable aspect of ourself. And so whatever is inside the heart, whenever it gets pushed, comes out. And so if there's fear, if you're afraid to show up, if you're afraid that you're going to get hurt, if you're afraid that that person's going to leave you, if you're afraid that they're going to pick someone better than you, you don't feel worth it because maybe you had parents that never encouraged you and always beat you down. Whatever is in there that you've been carrying inside, that when you start pursuing love, it's always the catalyst for for bringing those things out. And most of the time, most people just feel the hurt, but they don't realize that when hurt gets exposed, it's meant to be healed. Think about the physical body. It's like if you get a cut, you know, and you let fresh air hit it, the body heals itself. But most of us don't even know how that we can heal, which is why I provide my work. And I need to say that right now that I'm 15 minutes in, that, you know, I have programs to support you. They're in my description, but, you know, to help you if you're the person who keeps missing out on connection, they just keep breaking down. I have a course, a program for that. I have a program for people to help you with better boundaries to speak up for yourself. I've got 2 of those. I've got a vulnerability course for the person who only communicates at a very surface level and people never receive you because all they get is a surface you. How to be more vulnerable. And then I have my emotional warrior program, which is the most powerful program I opened that really helps you evolve from a person who feels very wounded into this like warrior when it comes to all things in life. So, and then I'm doing a current live experience. The last sign-up date is May 7th, and it's live. If not, then you'll get the recorded versions later. But when those areas of hurt come up, and I'll put a link to apply for coaching with me. I also offer coaching. But when those areas come up, they're meant to be healed. They can be healed. But I think most people don't realize that. And so they just go ow and they get pissed or they get afraid and then they shut down. Some people get pissed, some people go out. It's a fight, fawn, flight or freeze response. But actually that's coming up because it wants to get loved on. It wants to get resolved. It wants to go on that journey. So I remember sharing with a client of mine that we were talking about vulnerability and he had lost his girlfriend because, you know, same situation, came from a bit of a broken home. And so he lost this girl because he wasn't really sharing his heart with her. He was being kind of cold and not being as sincere, and she got tired of his bullshit and she left, which she should have. And so I told him, I said, listen, I'm just telling you as your coach, I can feel a wall with you, my man. And I said, if I can feel that wall with you, I guarantee you she can. And I said, you know, vulnerability is not your strong suit. And to do relationship requires vulnerability. And she's not getting, and vulnerability is exposing someone to our heart. And she's not getting any of your heart. She's just getting a lot of this and a lot of what you think a man should be. And it's not resonating with her and you're failing. And he, you know, he was a strong guy, so, or I wouldn't say strong, maybe hard-headed and stubborn. And he said, oh no, I'm good at vulnerability. He said, I have a best friend and I'm super vulnerable with her. I open up and I tell her a lot of things. And I said, here's the difference. And this is going back to what I just said about the heart being so tender and why relationships expose these things in our hearts that we've been carrying around for a long time, that come from our fathers, come from our mothers, come from our upbringing. I said, your best friend cannot hurt your heart the way the woman that loves you can. Because the woman that you love and she loved you, she has access to the most intimate areas of your heart that feel the most tender, that can hurt the most. That your best friend, you don't even think to give her access there, because best friends don't get access to those places. Someone's explained it to me like a bullseye, you know, it's like people are on the outside, you know, or there, but then as people keep coming in, the circle gets smaller and smaller. Those are the deepest places that they get access to, that we give them access to, willingly or sometimes even unwillingly. And so when I said that to him, he was like, oh, and the light started coming on. Like, I see why it's easier for me to be vulnerable with the best friend, but I'm not giving those areas of my heart to the girl, the woman I love. So listen, I think you just being really honest with yourself is something that you've got to do for you. Otherwise, it'll just keep repeating. It'll repeat in all your relationships. And really, it's a story that your heart is holding on to, that it believes that it encountered very young, maybe still be encountering. If you still have a relationship with your parents now, the story may still be going on. Listen, what happened to you, there's nothing that you can do about it, right? But what you create from here on out, because you've been exposed to the message now, what you create here on out, that becomes your responsibility to your highest self. That big version of you that wants to leave a grand legacy, that person that you are aspiring to become, that you know you can become, that person is looking at the current you and going, you heard the message. Please take heed. Let's start looking at these areas. Let's start getting some new tools in our tool belt to start addressing them. Let's heal. Let's get some resolve in these areas. But what I see too many people do, and when you do this, you perpetuate the cycle. Ignoring and distracting yourself and hoping it goes away. It's the same thing in business. If you've got a problem, let's say you got a cash flow problem, and you just ignore it and hope it goes away, it doesn't until you put some focus on it and you find some resolve, you find some solutions there. It's the same with your heart. These issues of the heart are not going to go away on their own. They're going to require you to step up, to become an emotional warrior and go, I can't run from this. This is bullshit. I got to start facing what's going on in my heart. I know it's a straight up video, but it's the same video that will save your life. If you want to stop sabotaging your life, then this is a message that your heart's been needing to hear, and that your heart has been needing you to pay attention to for a really long time. What will you do now? Like I said, I've got my online programs that you can do on your own. They're all in the description. Every single one of those I've listed out for you. And if you want to work with me, I'll put an application in the comment section. But know that there are tools. I've got tools and I've got resources, and you don't have to go at this alone. In fact, I don't advise that you go at it alone. In my journey of healing my areas of my life, which I really dive into in my Emotional Warrior program, I didn't do any of it. I always had someone in the background supporting me. And so if I'm that person for you, if you feel that safety and that connection with me, then apply for coaching. But if you're that person, you're like, I want to do this on my own for a little bit because this is all new to me, then get started with one of my online programs. They're all in the description there to get you supported. I love you, and I'm going to look at the camera. I love you, and it's difficult when you come from a situation where you've had a father that has not been good to you, and the marks that relationship can leave can be painful and lasting, and none of it was fair. None of it was. But what will you do for yourself to redeem and bring justice to those areas in your heart and in your life? You are loved, you are supported, and you matter. Take care. I'll see you in one of my next videos.